Welcome to Tropic Topics as we are entering the 2025 hurricane season, and we're starting off with this year's predictions. We've got Colorado State University, that's what CSU stands for, NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and then our averages based on climatology. So what we typically see in a hurricane season listed there for your averages. So just going over the predictions for this year, and you can see the number of storms above average based on NOAA as well as Colorado State, number of hurricanes expected above average, and the same thing for number of major hurricanes. And there's a couple of reasons for this and factors that are going to go into why that prediction has come out. I will remind you that we had 18 storms last year. We had 5 make landfall in the US. So really the numbers here, they don't mean anything. It's all about how many storms make landfall and will it impact our area. And that's really a 5 to 7 day type of thing. So preseason predictions really don't mean a whole lot. Just something to think about as we get ready for hurricane season. And now that we're in hurricane season, you want to stay ready. So have those checklists ready, know your emergency evacuation plans, know what's going on, have all of those things preset in your mind and have them planned out. Because the last thing you want to do is have a hurricane knocking on the door and go, what do I need to do now? You always want to know what to do ahead of times, how to prep your home, what you need to take for your supplies, what supplies you should have at home, how many of those supplies you should have, and the materials that you may want to have on hand as the hurricane season goes on, because all of those things are going to be very, very important. As we're waiting for other people to join here, I will remind you any questions, comments, or concerns you can leave in the comment section on either social media pages that are running this at the moment, and we will surely go through those questions toward the end of this video and try to answer them as well. So the first question we got here from Casper, even though it's not the end of the video, we're going to go ahead and answer it for you, buddy. We are going to do 2 a month for sure. We're starting off with this one just because it is the start of hurricane season, but these will probably come at the end of the week. We'll put out some more information on that as to when this series is going to run and how long they're going to be and when we're going to be doing that. So we'll have that information for you, but we're definitely going to be doing at least 2 a month. If the season is more active and we have a storm going, then we'll do it the way we did it last year, which means you will see Amelia in the morning do a Tropic Topics, and then you will see me in the afternoon give you an update on that Tropic Topics as well as the storm system is coming for us or toward us or into the Gulf or around us. If it's going to be something that impacts our area, we're going to ramp up coverage and we're going to do it right here so that you have all the information at your hand. I don't want to scare you. Amelia doesn't want to scare you. We don't want to give you more information than you need. So we're really only planning on doing 2 a month, and hopefully it's a quiet hurricane season and we end with only doing 10 Tropic Topics. We have 181 days to go, so hopefully we don't have to do this all that often, but we are planning to do at least 2 a month so that you can stay updated, and then we will fill in more as we go. So that is the plan for this year. Let's jump right into it. Now that you've seen the preseason predictions, we'll go right into how many, or rather the season as it goes. So when do we expect things to ramp up? Well, in June, July, really not a whole lot going on. We typically see a storm here or there, and you've probably already heard the noise and chatter about a tropical system coming out of the Caribbean and Gulf. We'll address that in a few minutes, but typically we might get a storm or 2 between June and July, but we usually don't see things ramp up until the end of August. It's August 20th to October 20th that we see hurricane season really take over, and that's when we see 90% of all of our tropical activity. So even if the early part of the season isn't all that active, or even if the early part of the season is active, it really doesn't play a role as to how the rest of the season is going to go. Water temperature, shear, and dry air all play a factor into this hurricane season all year long, including at the beginning of the season. In June, we usually have some cooler water temperatures. We usually have a lot of shear because we still have cold fronts going around, and we're usually dealing with Saharan dust, and quite a bit of it between June and July, which really starts to ramp up as we go through the month of June. That is already happening. That, along with Canadian wildfires, which have made a big headline as of late, are providing quite a bit of dry air in the mid-levels and the upper atmosphere. So there is a lot of dry air to contend with out there right now. And I always like to point out that no matter how active the season is, it only takes one. We know this from Michael in 2018. You can see it showing up there in purple. It's one of 2 Category 5s to make landfall in the state of Florida, and it is one of 4 Category 5s to make landfall in the U.S. All 4 Category 5s that made landfall in the U.S., they were tropical storms 3 days prior to making landfall. All 4. So just because something is a tropical storm 3 days out doesn't mean that it won't rapidly intensify before making landfall, and that's why you have to check forecasts frequently. They change frequently, especially with the tropics, because a tropical system is literally a pinball in what is a massive scale type of environment that is going on. It is one little factor in the overall forecast, and it can be moved around and shifted based off any kinds of shifts that are going on in the atmosphere. It's really just along for the ride, and it's not until you get a very big system that starts to manipulate the environment around it, like Helene did last year. We saw Helene actually manipulate its environment just a touch and help to buckle the jet stream just a little bit as well. So it takes a large system to really have an impact on scale. And most of the time, hurricanes, like I said, they're just along for the ride. They're either being pulled or pushed. Cold front, high pressure system, which means something is steering it. And if nothing is steering it, you get a Dorian situation where it sits over Grand Bahama for about 30 hours. So that is very rare. Hopefully we don't see anything like that. We had Dorian and Harvey produce massive rainfall amounts like that, and even Florence, which was a slow-moving system into the Carolinas, doing the same kind of thing. So stalling can be just as bad as something ramping up really, really quickly. We had a little bit of experience with that here in 2020 with Sally. That helped to produce 15 to 17 inches of rain across the entire panhandle. So again, it only takes one. And of your recent memory, you can see Dennis, Opal, and Eloise, all of which I heard nonstop before Michael. I went through blah, 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 enter one of those 3 storms, I'll be fine. We can see the difference between where Dennis, Opal, and Eloise made landfall versus where Michael made landfall. And even if you went through Michael and you were here in 2018, if you weren't in the direct eye wall, if you weren't in Bay County, parts of Gulf County, Calhoun, parts of Liberty, going back up into Washington and Jackson, you probably didn't have the same experience as the people that were in those counties. In fact, you probably had far less of an experience than those people. And same thing goes if you were much further west in Eloise and Opal and Dennis, it was much worse there than it was here. So it all depends on where the track is going, how the storm is approaching, how big the storm is, and then how strong the storm is. All of those things play factors into what is going to impact you. So you want to pay attention to forecasts for your specific location and your specific impacts, because impacts are going to be widely different across the variety of the area. So that's always the big thing to pay attention to in hurricane season. As we go forward, looking at June, well, where do we typically see a June formation? I'll try to go back here for you if I can. Let's click on that. We'll stop out of here and then go back to it. June hurricane season, where do we typically see a formation? Well, it's usually in the Gulf of Mexico. It's usually working up the Atlantic seaboard and then working that way. So where do we have some tropical interest right now? Well, coming out of the Gulf of Mexico or in the Eastern Caribbean or on the Atlantic side. So it makes complete sense with what we're seeing in the modeling as to what we're seeing on the year. Where do we typically see a hurricane if we're going to see a hurricane out of a tropical season in June? Well, you see it right there. That would be our area and the west side of or the east side of the Gulf. And I know this is an old map. I know that says Gulf of Mexico instead of Gulf of America. That's because I pulled this over from last year. So that will be updated for those that want the correct labeling. But that's why that labeling is that way, because I just pulled this over from 2024. You can't see it, but in my thing it says Hurricane June 2024. So even though my map says 2025. So that way too long of an explanation on that. Going through hurricane season last year we had Beryl make landfall. It was our only MDR system to actually make landfall in the U.S. That means main development region. Everything else that developed out there in the main development region actually didn't make landfall in the U.S. It had to be homegrown and local to either the Caribbean or the Gulf of America for it to make landfall in the U.S. Hopefully that is not the case this year, but that is what we saw last year, is basically this pattern where we saw things develop down here and then try to get pulled north. And that usually is the case later in the season and early in the season. So much like June activity, you can see going through there. And what did we have impact us? Well, we had Helene, we had Debbie, and then obviously this one down here is Milton, which set all kinds of records down here in some crazy warm water on the southern Gulf. So that is what we were impacted by last year. And yes, that long track system Beryl that worked all the way into Texas after crossing the Yucatan. So there are plenty of storms that will develop this year and develop every year that you never hear about. Why? Because they develop out here and they curve north, and they're not worth talking about because all they're going to do is mix some fish up and some ships. If some ships are out there in those areas, we're dealing with that kind of stuff. So if you got a cruise planned, especially later on in the summer, I would definitely pay attention to our tropical forecasting and the tropics, because there's always somebody that says, well, I've got a cruise in November through the Bahamas, and will my weather be nice? And I always say, well, you picked a cruise in the Bahamas in November. I think you know the answer to that, or in October or September. So you kind of get the picture there. So what's going on right now as we dive into it? Our Gulf water temperatures, plenty warm. Whatever we need for tropical systems to sustain is about 78 degrees. What we have out there pretty consistently is about 80 to 84. This is running about average or slightly below average thanks to our winter, but in the Gulf, the water temperature really doesn't matter because it heats up so quickly. So if we get a high pressure system to set up shop over the Gulf for 3 weeks with temperatures in the 90s, I can promise you the water temperature will shoot up rapidly. Same thing if we get a cold front that comes in, or we get unsettled weather over the Gulf for a couple of weeks, you'll see the water temperature rapidly go down. If you remember back to last year when someone said, I think it was, we set a record with the water temperature reaching 100 in one of these bays down here around Key Largo. Well, I can zoom in and show you exactly what bay that was. It was right here, and that water is about 5 feet. It's pretty close to land, and it's about 5 feet of water where that buoy is. So no surprise that that water temperature was that warm. So when you see someone saying the Gulf of America, see, I almost tripped myself up there. When the Gulf is on fire, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about these little hot spots that are around. They're not really talking about the overall anomalies. Usually the anomaly in the Gulf is about 3 to maybe 5 degrees above average at most. And most of the time, those fluctuate pretty rapidly. So somebody that's doing that is definitely trying to get your attention. That's all they're trying to get your attention for. How about, so now that we've established we can get tropical activity because the water temperature is warm enough, how about Saharan dust? You hear about this a lot, especially when we get a big plume to come in. Well, guess what? We got a big plume coming in. You can see it right there working across the Greater Antilles. That's going to be making its way toward us as we go into Wednesday and Thursday. You note a nice cyclonic spin there across the southeast, and that all has to do with a low pressure system that's going to be bringing us rain. It is a non-tropical low at the moment, but it could transition to a tropical low on the Atlantic side and then move away from the U.S. So not really going to have an impact on our forecast at all at this point in time. We don't have any interest really worth watching outside of that non-tropical low that is off to our south. So you can see that this trough is digging in. That is a surface-based trough with a cold front attached to it. That is the leftover remnants of our cold front that we got to enjoy the dry dew points with. That's going to basically retrograde back up into our area and try to develop into a broad, non-tropical or subtropical type of system, work across in the Atlantic right along that frontal boundary there, and then we could see something try to develop on that boundary south of, say, South Carolina or off to the east of Georgia, and then it will work along the Gulf Stream off to the north and east. So maybe some rip currents for the mid-Atlantic or some unsettled weather for the Carolinas, but really not a big deal, and nothing else going on in the Caribbean, the Gulf, or the Atlantic whatsoever. We do eventually, over the next 2 weeks, we'll watch to see a Central American gyre try to develop. That's just a broad spin that will be going on down here. For those that are wondering about the hype cast from the individuals that just love to get your attention with tropical weather, well, that would be from this tropical trough that is situated right there. It is dissipating today. So the GFS that kept throwing out hurricane after hurricane after hurricane for June 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, well, it was wrong because there's nothing there. And now that there's nothing there, guess what? The GFS has completely dropped that tropical activity. Where do we see tropical activity coming out of the Gulf, or rather coming out of the GFS now? Well, now it's 2 weeks down the road from now. So it's about 4 days later than it was, and it shifted everything west with the Central American gyre. So if you watched my social media or you're a part of my social media, you probably saw a post today where I talked about over dispersion. The GFS is really bad at that. They had 492 named storms or genesis of storms last year. We had 18 tropical systems last year. So that means the GFS was right roughly 4% of the time on its forecasting. It is over dispersive. On the other side, the Euro also over dispersive, but the Euro only had 192 storms last year and we had 18. So it was actually more accurate, at least as far as getting it right, than the GFS was. Now, the overdispersion has some benefits. The fact that the GFS pulls out systems out of nowhere randomly typically allows it to sniff stuff out sooner, maybe 3 or 4 days before the Euro jumps on board. So what does that mean? That means if the Euro isn't showing it and the GFS is, it's probably not real. If the GFS and the Euro both have it, well, then it's probably something we should watch. If it's the GFS, the Euro, the Canadian, the Icon, and all of the other models that have Genesis, then it's definitely something we should watch. Basically what I'm saying, if one model is showing a tropical system, long range, mid range, short range, doesn't matter what it is. If one model is showing it and it's the only one showing it, it's probably something wrong with that model as opposed to all the other models being wrong. So when you're looking at those tropical pages that just throw out a model without any kind of clue or anything like that, look for the hour timestamp. If it is behind, if it's past 180 hours, that's 7 days from now. If it's past 180 hours, it's probably not real, because at 180 hours, 7 days from now, you're talking about interactions between troughs and systems that are projected based off of interactions between troughs and systems that are happening now. You're talking 3-4 days down the road. So it's interaction after interaction after interaction after interaction that hasn't happened, that it's expecting to happen and has to go exactly that way for that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 day forecast to actually verify. So you have to have everything go perfect for that one model to be right and all the other models to be wrong, which is why I say when you're looking at that kind of stuff, look at it with a grain of salt. Certainly do your homework and double check, unless you just like doing that kind of stuff and speculating on that kind of stuff. If that's the case, good for you, but please leave me out of it. I have enough to worry about as far as tropical systems go, and I'm already watching. I don't need you asking me 1,000 times if there's going to be a hurricane 3 weeks from now. My answer is always going to be laughable in response on that, because it's just not realistic to know that. As we look at what is going on right now that I've gotten done with my rant for the day, we do have some tropical activity out there. As I said, the National Hurricane Center has posted 2 little bits of tropical activity, one in the Eastern Pacific. This has a moderate chance of development. And then obviously, as I pull the map over here and mess up my graphic, you can see that there is now a 10% chance of development out of this non-tropical low interacting with this cold front. So really it's this trough that is down here, and this is a tropical trough, but no organization. A trough just means a broad area of spin and lift. So with that tropical trough, or leftover cold front that brought us the cooler, drier air. Digging in, that is allowing for a little bit of spin on the backside, interacting with this dry air and interacting with the cold front off to our north and west. So as I said, over the next several days, we should see this low pressure system develop basically over the top of us, and then get pulled along that cold front off into the Gulf Stream, and then that will work out into the Atlantic. So no real worries on that end. As we wrap up here, I am going to go through the comments and questions. I don't see a whole lot going on here. So if we don't have any comments or questions, I'll give you a couple of seconds here to ask anything else. But if you don't have anything, then we will just move on from here and call it done with our first Tropic Topics of the season. Not too bad overall, and just a minor rant on my end, just a minor one as we move forward. So good luck. Again, 181 days, it's a long season, but thankfully we're talking about maybe 18 or 19 storms this year. Hopefully that ends up being the case, and hopefully they all end up being fish mixers or end up being relatively impactful. But at this point in time, really no way to know any of that, really no way to know what we're going to see or how this season is going to go overall, other than just the fact that we don't have La Nina, we don't have El Nino, and we have warmer than average water temperatures across the main development region. We're not expecting a ton of shear out there, but any given year you can see things interseasonally that develop, like wave breaking with high pressure systems, or a TUT. That's a tropical upper troposphere trough. And those things destroy hurricane season. It makes it very, very quiet. Think back to 2011, where we had an above average season actually predicted, and we got 5 storms. There was basically nothing out there, and that was because of the TUT that developed across the Atlantic. Think 2 years ago, we had an above average season predicted, and while we did have some impactful storms, we actually ended up well below average as far as the season goes, and that has everything to do with where the monsoon trough set up, as well as the fact that we were dealing with wave breaking, high pressure systems that were breaking down over the Gulf of Mexico, or over the Atlantic, and then dissipating basically shear all across the Atlantic, and that helped to reduce everything as well. So with that said, good luck, and we'll be here for you as we go throughout the 2025 hurricane season. You can always check the latest on mypanhandle.com. If you go to our website, you can click on weather. You'll see Hurricane HQ. You'll also see hurricane tips there as well. Those things are great resources for you to know what to do, especially as the storm's approaching. You can always check in with us on social media as well. And if you don't have the Storm Track 13 app, you should download it. Not because of tropical systems. While tropical systems are useful to track on our Storm Track 13 app, because there is the modeling systems on there, all you got to do is turn on the spaghetti models and you can see what's going on. You can even get cone forecast on there as well. But it is summer, and we have pop-up storms all the time. And what this app is wonderful for is it will tell you when lightning is nearby or within 15 miles. And if you're on the beach or the golf course or out at the park or the splash pad or the springs or any of the number of activities that you will be doing outside this summer, guess what? This app can absolutely help you and give you some information. So that is there for you. It is free and available on the App Store as well as Google Play. So that is going to